Your Honor, before you play that video, I need to clarify something. Officer Ethan Cole's voice sounded confident, but his right hand betrayed him. It trembled against the polished wooden table. Across the courtroom, Judge Linda Hayes slowly lifted her eyes from the case file. The room had been restless only moments earlier, lawyers whispering, reporters adjusting their notebooks, spectators shifting on hard benches, but now every sound seemed to disappear beneath the cold fluorescent lights. What exactly would you like to clarify, Officer Cole? She asked. Ethan swallowed. Beside him, Officer Mark Reeves stared straight ahead, his jaw locked so tightly that a vein pulsed near his temple. Both men still wore their uniforms. Both badges still caught the light. To everyone watching, they looked like symbols of authority. But authority has a strange way of shrinking when the truth enters the room. At the defense table sat Marcus Bennett, a 42-year-old black father who had spent the previous 3 nights inside a county jail cell. He wore a simple charcoal suit borrowed from his older brother. The sleeves were slightly too long, and a faint red mark remained around his left wrist where the handcuffs had pressed into his skin. Marcus did not look at Ethan. He looked at the screen mounted beside the jury box. His attorney, Rachel Carter, stood beside him with one hand resting on a small black remote. She had spent the morning listening as Ethan and Mark described Marcus as dangerous, calculating, and aggressive. They claimed he had resisted their instructions. They claimed they had discovered illegal evidence hidden inside the trunk of his car. They spoke with practiced certainty. They spoke as if a badge could transform a lie into fact. Rachel had not interrupted them. She had simply waited. Imagine sitting there while 2 armed officers describe a version of your life that never happened. Imagine hearing strangers discuss your character as though your skin, your silence, and your fear were proof of guilt. Imagine knowing the truth but wondering whether the room had already decided not to believe you. Marcus had lived inside that nightmare for 3 days. Now, for the first time, something had changed. A young officer named Daniel Brooks sat alone near the rear wall. His uniform looked freshly pressed, but his face carried the exhaustion of someone who had not slept. He kept his hands clasped between his knees, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ethan glanced back at him. It was only for a second. But Rachel saw it. So did Judge Hayes. Officer Cole, the judge said, her voice sharper now, you testified under oath that your body camera stopped recording before the search began. Yes, Your Honor. And you are certain of that? Ethan hesitated. Mark turned slightly toward him. The movement was small, almost invisible, but panic rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it appears in a tightened shoulder. A dry throat. A pair of eyes searching desperately for an exit that is no longer there. Yes, Ethan finally replied. I'm certain. Rachel pressed the button on the remote. The screen remained black. For one long moment, nothing happened. Then a timestamp appeared. 11:47 p.m. The exact minute Ethan claimed his camera had failed. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Marcus drew a slow breath. Daniel finally raised his head. Mark's face lost its color. And Ethan Cole, who had entered the courthouse believing the case was already won, stared at the glowing screen as though he were watching the door of his own future slam shut. The video had not even started. But the lie was already beginning to break. 3 days earlier, Marcus Bennett had believed the worst part of his night would be getting home late. Rain had begun to fall over Richmond just after 11, turning the streets into long ribbons of black glass beneath the traffic lights. Marcus drove carefully, one hand on the wheel and the other resting near a paper bag containing 2 slices of chocolate cake. His daughter Naomi had turned 12 that evening. He had promised he would bring something home after his shift. Marcus worked as a maintenance supervisor at a downtown hospital, the kind of job that kept him invisible until something stopped working. He repaired broken doors, faulty lights, leaking pipes, and machines no one noticed until they failed. He was tired, but the thought of Naomi waiting near the kitchen window kept him awake. Then red and blue lights appeared behind him. Marcus checked his speed. 34 in a 35. He signaled, pulled onto the shoulder, lowered his window, and placed both hands where they could be seen. Officer Ethan Cole approached slowly, rain shining across his uniform. His flashlight entered the car before his voice did, sweeping over Marcus's face, the passenger seat, and the bag of cake. License and registration. Marcus handed them over without argument. Was I speeding, officer? Ethan stared at him for a moment too long. Step out of the vehicle. There was no explanation. No warning. Only an order sharpened by the assumption that Marcus had no right to question it. A second patrol car stopped behind them. Officer Mark Reeves stepped out and moved toward the passenger side while a younger officer, Daniel Brooks, remained near the road, watching beneath the pale glow of the street lamp. Marcus exited carefully. Ethan searched his pockets, then pressed him against the cold side of the car. I haven't done anything, Marcus said. That's what everyone says, Mark replied. The words were casual. Practiced. Almost bored. Ethan opened the driver's door and searched beneath the seats. Mark checked the glove compartment. They found nothing. Marcus saw irritation flicker across Ethan's face. Not relief. Irritation. Then Ethan walked toward the trunk. Before opening it, he glanced at Mark and tapped twice against the center of his chest. Mark immediately touched his own body camera. Daniel noticed. A tiny red light disappeared. But his camera remained on. Marcus stood in the rain with his hands behind his head, unaware that the night had just changed. Unaware that Ethan was reaching into his jacket. Unaware that a small evidence bag was about to appear inside a car where it had never existed before. And unaware that one silent camera had recorded everything. The trunk opened with a soft mechanical click. Rainwater slid from the edge of the lid and struck the pavement in slow, steady drops. Ethan leaned forward, blocking Marcus's view with his body, while Mark stood near the rear door pretending to inspect the floor mats. Daniel remained several feet away. Watching. Ethan reached into the trunk with his left hand. With his right, he slipped something from inside his jacket and placed it beneath an old emergency blanket. The movement lasted less than 2 seconds. That was all it took. Got something, Ethan called. Mark hurried over with a performance of surprise already forming across his face. Marcus turned toward them. What did you find? Ethan lifted a clear plastic bag between two gloved fingers. Inside was a small handgun wrapped beside several packets of white powder. Marcus stared at it. For a moment, he could not speak. The rain touched his face like cold needles, but the shock inside him felt hotter than anger. That isn't mine. Ethan smiled. It was not the smile of an officer relieved to remove danger from the streets. It was the smile of a man whose plan had worked exactly as intended. Of course it isn't, he said. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, but Mark grabbed his shoulder and shoved him back against the car. Stay where you are. I have never seen that bag before, Marcus said, louder now. You put it there. The atmosphere changed instantly. Ethan's expression hardened. Mark twisted Marcus's arm behind his back, forcing his chest against the wet metal. You're accusing an officer of planting evidence? Ethan asked. I'm telling the truth. No, Ethan replied quietly. You're making your situation worse. The handcuffs closed around Marcus's wrists. Cold steel. One click. Then another. Across the road, a car slowed as it passed. The driver looked through the rain, saw a black man pressed against a vehicle and 2 white officers standing over him, then continued driving. No questions. No hesitation. Just another scene people had learned not to interrupt. Daniel's body camera captured everything, Ethan's hand entering his jacket, the bag disappearing beneath the blanket, the false discovery, and Marcus's immediate denial. Daniel knew what he had witnessed. His training told him to report it. His conscience demanded it. But Ethan was a decorated officer with 15 years in the department. Mark was his closest ally. Daniel had worn his own badge for only 7 months. Ethan looked toward him. "You saw the weapon in the trunk, correct?" Daniel froze. Rain ran down his face as the red light on his camera continued blinking. It was a simple question. But his answer would decide whether the badge protected the truth, or buried it. Daniel's mouth opened, but no answer came. Ethan stepped closer. The rain softened around them, yet the silence felt louder than the passing traffic. "You saw it," Ethan repeated. "Correct?" Daniel looked at Marcus. His wrists were cuffed behind his back. Water ran from his hair onto his collar. He was breathing slowly, forcing himself to remain still while Mark searched him again, as if patience itself had become suspicious. "I saw Officer Cole recover the bag," Daniel finally said. It was not the truth. Not completely. But it was enough. Ethan nodded with quiet satisfaction. Mark pulled Marcus away from the car and turned him toward the road. The patrol lights painted his face red, then blue, then red again, transforming an innocent man into a public spectacle. People began gathering beneath store awnings. A woman raised her phone. A delivery driver stopped beside his van. Someone whispered that Marcus must have done something serious. No one knew his name. No one knew about the hospital where he worked or the daughter waiting for him at home. They saw the handcuffs, the uniforms, and the evidence bag held high beneath the streetlight. For many of them, that was enough. "Keep your head down," Mark ordered. Marcus lifted it instead. "I want it clearly recorded," he said, his voice controlled despite the pressure in his chest. "That weapon is not mine. Those drugs are not mine. I did not consent to that search." Ethan laughed. "Listen to him," he said, turning toward the crowd. "Calm, rehearsed, knows exactly what to say." Mark smirked. "Probably done this before." The accusation moved through the witnesses like smoke. Marcus understood what they were doing. His fear would be called aggression. His anger would be called resistance. Even his composure was being rewritten as evidence of guilt. Imagine realizing that every possible reaction has already been turned against you. If you shout, you are dangerous. If you remain silent, you are calculating. If you stay calm, they say you have experience. Marcus looked toward Daniel's camera. The small red light was still blinking. "Officer," Marcus said, "you know what happened." Daniel's face tightened. Ethan immediately stepped between them. "That's enough." Mark opened the rear door of the patrol car and pushed Marcus inside. The paper bag from the passenger seat had fallen onto the wet pavement. Chocolate cake spilled through the torn bottom, dissolving beneath the rain. Marcus stared at it through the window. At midnight, Naomi would stop waiting. At 12:15, she would call his phone. And before sunrise, 2 officers would file a report describing a traffic stop that had never truly happened. By sunrise, the official report was complete. Officer Ethan Cole wrote that Marcus had been stopped after swerving across 2 lanes. He claimed Marcus appeared nervous, refused lawful commands, and gave permission for the vehicle search. Mark Reeves signed beneath the statement without changing a word. Daniel Brooks was called into the supervisor's office before his shift ended. Captain Howard Briggs sat behind a wide desk covered with commendations, framed photographs, and 15 years of carefully protected authority. Ethan stood near the window. Mark leaned against the wall with his arms folded. The door closed behind Daniel. "Your report needs correction," Briggs said. Daniel looked down at the document placed before him. One sentence had already been typed beneath his name. "I personally observed Officer Cole discover the weapon and narcotics during a lawful search." Daniel's stomach tightened. That isn't what I saw. No one moved. Briggs removed his glasses and placed them gently on the desk. You are 7 months into this job, he said. Ethan has served this department for 15 years. Think carefully about which version of events you believe you understand. It's not a version. Ethan stepped away from the window. You were standing in the rain, 20 feet back, he said. Visibility was poor. You saw me recover the evidence. That is all. The report says. Daniel remembered Marcus looking directly at him through the flashing lights. You know what happened. I saw your hand go into your jacket, Daniel replied. Mark's arms dropped to his sides. Briggs's voice became colder. Accusing a senior officer without proof can end a career. Daniel glanced toward the body camera docking station outside the glass wall. Every recording was uploaded automatically when an officer returned to the precinct. But Ethan had told the technician that his device malfunctioned. Mark's footage had been marked corrupted. Daniel had said nothing about his own camera. Not yet. I need time to review my notes, he said. Briggs pushed the statement closer. You need to sign. Daniel picked up the pen. For one unbearable second, its tip hovered above the paper. Then he signed only his name on the blank attendance line and stepped away. Ethan's eyes narrowed, but Daniel was already leaving. Inside the equipment room, he locked the door and opened the digital archive. His hands shook as he searched the timestamp. 11:47 p.m. The file appeared. Unedited. Complete. Daniel copied it onto an encrypted drive, then watched the first few seconds in silence. Ethan's hand entered his jacket. The evidence bag disappeared beneath the blanket. And in the corner of the screen, Marcus stood beneath the rain, already condemned by a crime that had not existed until a police officer created it. Daniel carried the encrypted drive in his pocket for the next 48 hours. It felt heavier than his badge. At the precinct, no one mentioned the missing footage directly, but the pressure followed him everywhere. Conversations stopped when he entered the break room. Mark watched him from across the parking lot. Ethan passed his desk twice without speaking, each time letting his hand rest against Daniel's chair. The message was clear. Stay loyal. Stay silent. Captain Briggs summoned him again that afternoon. This time, there was no statement on the desk. Only Daniel's personnel file. You have a promising future here, Briggs said. Good evaluations. Strong instincts. Don't destroy that over a misunderstanding. Daniel remained standing. What happens if the evidence was planted? Briggs leaned back slowly. Evidence does not plant itself, Officer Brooks. And careers do not survive reckless accusations. There it was. Not a warning about truth. A warning about consequences. Daniel left the office with his heart pounding. For the first time since joining the department, the badge on his chest did not feel like a promise. It felt like a test. That evening, Marcus sat behind thick glass in the county jail visitation room while Rachel Carter studied the police report. They say you consented to the search, she said. I didn't. They say you resisted. I asked why I was being arrested. Rachel looked at the photographs of the trunk, the evidence bag, and the emergency blanket beneath it. Something about the arrangement felt too clean, too deliberate. Was anyone else there? A younger officer, Marcus replied. He saw everything. Did you get his name? Brooks. Daniel Brooks. Rachel wrote it down. At 9:16 that night, an anonymous email appeared in her secure inbox. No greeting. No explanation. Only one sentence. The official body camera record is incomplete. Attached was a 12-second video clip. Rachel pressed play. Rain filled the screen. Ethan opened the trunk. His hand entered his jacket. Then the video stopped. It was not enough to prove the entire crime. But it was enough to prove someone had lied. Across town, Daniel sat alone in his apartment, staring at the full recording on his laptop. He had sent only 12 seconds because fear still held the rest. Then his phone vibrated. Unknown number. A message appeared. "We know you copied the file." Daniel's breath stopped. A second message followed. "Bring it to court, and you will lose more than your badge." He looked at the encrypted drive beside him. The system had finally made its demand. Protect the uniform. Or protect the innocent man wearing handcuffs because of it. The courtroom filled before 9. Reporters occupied the front benches. Officers from Ethan's precinct stood together near the back, their uniforms forming a wall of blue beneath the fluorescent lights. Marcus sat beside Rachel with his hands folded on the table, listening as strangers whispered about the weapon, the drugs, and the kind of man they believed he must be. The trial had not truly begun, yet guilt already hung in the room. Ethan Cole took the witness stand first. He wore his decorated uniform and spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had told the same lie until it sounded like memory. "Mr. Bennett was driving erratically," he said. He appeared nervous and repeatedly reached toward the center console. Marcus looked at Rachel. Neither detail had appeared in the first version of Ethan's report. "And did the defendant consent to the search?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "That is a lie," Marcus whispered. Rachel placed one hand over his clenched fist. "Let him finish." Ethan described opening the trunk and discovering the evidence beneath the emergency blanket. He called the search routine. He called Marcus uncooperative. He called the arrest necessary. Each word placed another brick around an innocent man. Mark Reeves testified next. His story matched Ethan's almost perfectly. Too perfectly. The same phrases. The same pauses. Even the same description of Marcus's expression. "He looked calculating," Mark said. "Like he knew he had been caught." The prosecutor lifted the sealed evidence bag for the jury to see. A low murmur moved through the room. There it was. The object that had transformed Marcus from a hospital worker and father into a headline. The prosecutor placed it carefully on the table as though it were sacred. "Your Honor, the state's evidence is clear," he said. 2 experienced officers discovered illegal narcotics and an unregistered firearm in the defendant's vehicle. Judge Hayes turned toward Rachel. "Counsel." Rachel rose slowly. She had the anonymous clip. She had the conflicting timestamps. But she did not have the complete recording, and Daniel Brooks had not answered any of her calls. At the rear of the courtroom, an empty seat remained beside the aisle. Daniel's seat. Ethan noticed it and smiled. Marcus noticed the smile. For the first time since his arrest, fear moved across his face. The system had prepared its testimony, protected its officers, and displayed its manufactured truth before the jury. Then the courtroom doors opened. Daniel Brooks stepped inside. His face was pale. His uniform was gone. In one hand, he carried an encrypted drive. In the other, he carried his badge. And Ethan Cole's smile disappeared. Daniel walked down the center aisle as every eye in the courtroom followed him. The silence was absolute. Not respectful. Afraid. Captain Briggs rose from the back row. "Officer Brooks, you are not authorized to. I'm not here under department authority," Daniel said. His voice shook, but he did not stop walking. Rachel stepped toward him. Daniel handed her the encrypted drive, then placed his badge beside it on the defense table. Ethan leaned toward the prosecutor. "This is misconduct," he whispered. "That file could be altered." Daniel heard him. "No," he said. "The department copy was altered." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Hayes struck the gavel once. "Mr. Brooks, are you prepared to testify under oath?" Daniel looked at Marcus. For 3 days, that man had sat inside a jail cell while Daniel carried the truth in his pocket. Yes, Your Honor. Minutes later, he sat on the witness stand. Rachel approached slowly. Did you witness Officer Cole search Mr. Bennett's vehicle? Yes. Did you see him discover the evidence as described in his report? Daniel's hands tightened around the edge of the stand. No, Ethan stood abruptly. He's lying. The judge's voice cracked through the room. Sit down, Officer Cole. Rachel inserted the drive into the courtroom computer. The screen flickered. Rain appeared. 11:47 p.m. Ethan opened Marcus's trunk. Mark touched his body camera, and its red light vanished. Then Ethan glanced toward the road, reached inside his jacket, and removed a clear plastic bag. The courtroom stopped breathing. On the screen, Ethan placed the bag beneath the emergency blanket. Seconds later, he lifted it and shouted, "Got something." The video continued. Marcus denied ownership. Mark forced him against the car. Ethan smiled. It was all there. The planted evidence. The false discovery. The humiliation. The lie. Marcus watched without moving, but tears gathered in his eyes. Not because the truth surprised him. Because, finally, everyone else could see it. Mark lowered his head. The prosecutor stepped away from the evidence table as though the sealed bag had become poisonous. Ethan stared at the screen, his face drained of color. That footage is out of context, he said. Daniel looked directly at him. There is no context that makes that right. Judge Hayes ordered the jury removed and called courthouse security forward. Ethan reached instinctively toward his badge. But the badge no longer meant protection. 2 deputies approached him from behind. The same handcuff clicks Marcus had heard in the rain now echoed through the courtroom. 1 click. Then another. And this time, they closed around the man who had created the crime. Judge Linda Hayes dismissed every charge against Marcus Bennett before noon. Her voice remained controlled, but anger sharpened each word as she described the evidence as manufactured, the testimony as corrupt, and the arrest as a violation of everything the courtroom was supposed to protect. Marcus stood beside Rachel while the clerk removed his case from the record. For 3 days, strangers had called him dangerous. Now the same room watched him become innocent again, as though innocence were something the system had the authority to return. Ethan Cole and Mark Reeves were led through a side door in handcuffs. Their uniforms remained perfectly pressed, but their badges had been removed. Captain Briggs was detained minutes later after investigators discovered messages ordering Daniel to change his statement and delete the original recording. The wall of blue at the back of the courtroom slowly separated. Some officers lowered their eyes. Others walked away. None spoke. Daniel remained near the witness stand, staring at the badge he had placed on the table. Marcus approached him. You could have spoken that night, Marcus said. Daniel's face tightened. I know. My daughter waited for me until morning. I know. I sat in a cell because you were afraid. Daniel did not defend himself. That mattered. I was afraid of losing everything, he whispered. Marcus looked toward the empty seats where Ethan's supporters had been sitting. And I almost lost everything because of it. The truth settled between them without comfort. Forgiveness did not arrive immediately. It was not supposed to. Justice could expose wrongdoing, but it could not erase the night, the handcuffs, or the cake dissolving beneath the rain. Daniel picked up his badge. For a moment, he held it in his palm. Then he placed it in Judge Hayes's hand. I thought wearing this made me one of the good ones, he said. But a badge means nothing if I only tell the truth when it is safe. Outside, cameras crowded the courthouse steps. Marcus emerged into the afternoon light with Rachel beside him. Naomi broke through the reporters and wrapped her arms around his waist. He held her tightly. No speeches. No celebration. Just a father finally returning to the child who had waited for him. Behind them, courthouse officers escorted Ethan and Mark toward separate vehicles as the same cameras recorded every step. Ethan had believed the uniform would protect his lie. Mark had believed silence would make him untouchable. Briggs had believed the system belonged to men like them. But truth does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits inside a camera. Sometimes it trembles in the hands of a frightened witness. And sometimes, when the courtroom finally presses play, justice reveals that the most dangerous evidence is the evidence against those who thought they controlled it.